Welcome to the Justin Strawn podcast. I am your host, Justin Strawn. Glad to be back with you for another day of recording here on a Friday morning as we get ready for a big weekend for the Mississippi State Bulldogs baseball team as they get ready to travel to Arlington and take on three teams from Power Four conferences. So we have that to look forward to if you're a Mississippi State fan. Definitely we'll be talking about that. We're going to also be talking a little bit about the ABS system that's being introduced in Major League Baseball this year. It's been used in the minor leagues in previous seasons, and they are introducing it as a challenge system to the Major League Baseball teams this year. It's being introduced in spring training games, so I want to talk a little bit about that as well. I will also talk a little bit about the show Shrinking. I've totally forgot that it was out, and I'm kind of trying to get caught up on it now as we move into, I think the 6th episode will take place next week, if I'm not mistaken. So like I said, I want to talk about all that. But if you're not following me on any of the social media platforms, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, I would really appreciate it if you were to go on and give me a like, subscribe, follow. If you can do that, it would do me a big favor, and it would help me out a lot in terms of getting this podcast in front of other people. If you're on one of the podcast catchers, if you can rate and if you can follow, if you can subscribe, same thing. All those things do a lot to help get the show in front of new people, and I would really like to do it to really grow this podcast and possibly get it a little bit bigger and do some more things with it. But so let's go ahead and get into the show. Mississippi State is traveling to Arlington, like I said earlier. They are going to be taking on Arizona State at 11 o'clock this morning. They take on Virginia Tech tomorrow, I think at 2:30, and UCLA right around the same time on Sunday. Obviously, the big game that has everyone's attention is the UCLA game. They are, by most accounts, I think the unanimous number one team in the country. There may be a poll or two out there that doesn't have them as number one. They're still pretty high in every single one of them. So this is going to be that's the game that obviously has everybody talking, has everybody excited, because Mississippi State number 4 in the D1 baseball poll. They're for the most part they're a top 5 consensus team. There may be a poll or two out there that doesn't have them in the top 5, but there's not very many that don't. Like I said, so top 5 matchup, one of the bigger matchups to start the season here in 2026 as we roll into the month of March. So a lot to look forward to that, but you can't overlook these first 2 games. Arizona State is undefeated. They are playing incredibly well right now, and they're off to a really good start. Arizona State used to be one of the best baseball teams in the country. They had a history for a while there of just absolutely pummeling people. This was the school of Barry Bonds. So like I said, they used to have a pretty decent history, and they've kind of come across hard times recently, but maybe this is them trying to surge their way back into the forefront and possibly, become a school that could host, try to work their way into a top 8 seed. And the way they can do that is by going into this tournament and beating some good teams, and Mississippi State would be one of those good teams. So you can't overlook a team like Arizona State. They will have their best pitcher on the mound on Friday to take on the Bulldogs, and that's always a concern because even if they're not the best team in the country, sometimes all it takes is just one guy playing really, really well to shut down a really good offense, and that's what Mississippi State has. So that's a concern coming into this game. Virginia Tech isn't going to be as highly regarded as any of the other teams that Mississippi State plays this weekend, but they're still, like I said, an ACC team. I said on the show on Tuesday, I guess is when I last recorded, is they are an ACC team. They are in a tough conference, and they know what it's like to play high-ranked teams and take on teams that of a high caliber. So they're not going to be intimidated just because Mississippi State is rolling in with the M/S logo, with the amount of history that Mississippi State has in terms of baseball. They're not going to be intimidated by that. They're not going to back down. So you still need to go in and be focused and ready to perform at your best for that game. And if you can win those 2 games, you have a chance to make a statement against UCLA on Sunday afternoon. Look, Thunder and Lightning, I was listening in the last couple of days, and they talked, especially this morning when I was listening to them, they talked quite a bit about, happens if Mississippi State goes into Arlington this weekend and goes 2-1, goes 3-0, and if one of those wins is over UCLA, could that potentially put them as the number one team in the country? And look, there's a possibility for that. UCLA took a loss on Wednesday night, I think, to San Diego State, if I'm not mistaken. That's who they lost to. And look, the top 10 took a beating this week during the midweek. I know Arkansas lost to Arkansas State. Oklahoma, I don't know if they were top 10, but they were a top 25 team. They ended up losing to Southern Miss. No, I'm sorry. Who'd they lose to? I can't remember who they lost to. They lost to Arizona State. The team that State's playing today. That's right. That's why I took note of it. So, Arizona State is feeling pretty confident about that after having beaten Oklahoma this week. You've got, I think, some other teams lost in the top 10. I can't remember who all. Southern Miss, who Mississippi State will play in the midweek next week, could end up being a top 10 team when that matchup takes place, because Southern Miss just absolutely killed Alabama earlier this week, and they're rolling right along right now as well. So like I said, they could end up being a top 10 team that Mississippi State plays during the midweek, and you just don't see that very often. Mississippi State has a lot in front of it. It has a big opportunity, but this is the first time that we will get a chance to really see if this Bulldog team is what we think they are. Now, it's also, we need to make sure that we are aware of, even if Mississippi State goes out, they roll, they go 3-0 this weekend, they go to Southern Miss next weekend, and they win that game. Nothing is still guaranteed. They still have a very tough SEC slate ahead of them. And even if they were to go completely undefeated in the non-conference portion of their schedule before they take on Arkansas in a couple of weeks, there's nothing guaranteed that this team is just going to roll into SEC play and just keep on doing what they had been doing. It's going to get harder. And that's the one thing that we're still waiting to see is, as this schedule starts to ramp up, as things start to get more difficult, can this Mississippi State team just continue to hit the ball the way they have? Look, I was really impressed by them on the midweek this week when they played Austin Peay, going out and scoring as much as they did and playing as well as they did against a team, like I said on Tuesday's show, it's a good team. It's not a bad team. I mean, they're the type of the team that can find their way into an NCAA tournament if they can win their conference tournament, and they might be favored to do so, and they absolutely get crushed by Mississippi State on Tuesday night. So that was a really, really impressive performance by the Bulldogs, and I just want to see if they can continue to keep the bats hot, and if the pitching can just continue to do what it's done so far, then you're in really good shape. The one really good thing that I've enjoyed watching this Mississippi State baseball team so far is they've played incredible defense. That's probably the biggest concern I had coming out of the Chris Lemonis era. The Bulldogs were terrible defensively under Chris Lemonis, absolutely terrible. I mean, they would often commit multiple errors a game, and they were just very sloppy, very lackadaisical when it came to defense. And when Chris Lemonis was the head coach, and it was just really frustrating to watch. I've said this before, and I'll say it again here. It was one of the reasons why I was really surprised that they were able to win the national championship in 2021, because I was just assuming like they're going to make too many errors. There's going to be an error that they make that's going to cost them big time at some point in a game, and it's going to end up sending them home once they get to Omaha. And that didn't happen. They fielded the ball very cleanly. I don't know if they made any errors when they were in Omaha. If they just kind of broke from what they had typically been doing throughout the course of that year. Coach O'Connor seems to have really shored up that part of the team. And that's one of the things that's those little things that most people don't really think about. When people are looking at this team and they're looking at how they are playing compared to what they did under Chris Lemonis, most people are probably going to say, they're hitting the ball better, they're pitching the ball better, and they're doing all those things better. But it's little things like just taking care of your fielding and making the plays that you're supposed to make and being solid defensively. That's the type of thing that really shows you where Chris Lemonis was lacking as a coach compared to a guy like Coach O'Connor, who has been doing this for so much longer and seems to have a better handle on what he wants from his team day in and day out. And he seems to be able to get more from them for that very reason. So like I said, I'm really interested to see how they do this weekend. I'll be very interested what happens if Mississippi State loses on Friday. To me, that's the game that really sets the tone for this weekend and for honestly going into these next couple of weeks before we take on Arkansas. Because if they end up getting beat by Arizona State, how do they respond to that? How do they rally? Do they kind of start to question themselves at that point? Do they think, well, maybe we're not quite as good as we thought we were? Or if they do end up losing to Arizona State, what does it can they show some resiliency, and can they end up going in and winning the rest of those games? Because at that point, if you lose to Arizona State, you have to start asking yourself, well, can they still get 2 wins this weekend? And I think that's really the minimum for success. You've got to find a way to get 2 wins this weekend. And they should. Look, like I said, they're the better team than Arizona State, at least for what we can tell so far. They're the better team than Arizona State. They're definitely the better team than Virginia Tech. And I honestly, based off the way that UCLA has played a couple times this year, because they do have 2 losses already, they might be better than UCLA. We'll have a better idea of that after we see them play on Sunday. Oh, excuse me. But this is a really good baseball team, and it would be nice for them to be ranked number 1 in the country if they were able to go out and sweep this weekend. But it wouldn't be the first time that they had, and they probably still wouldn't even be the consensus number 1 team if that ends up happening. But there's still a long way to go. This is still a very long season. They've still got 30 conference games left to play. They've still got a few non-conference games after this weekend as well. But this series could very well help give us an idea of just how the rest of this season is going to play out. And it could not. I mean, it's quite possible that if they end up, if they went 0-3, they still end up doing really well in SEC play, but they could go 3-0. And then because the SEC schedule is so difficult, they don't do so well. So I don't know. We'll see. I do want to briefly talk about the basketball team, because I don't know what to make of this basketball team. They end up just getting slaughtered by Alabama. They lose 100-75 on Wednesday night. And I've talked about this. I hate to harp on it, but I'm going to talk about it again. When Chris Jans came to Mississippi State, he brought with him a defensive mindset, a style of play that said, we are going to grind you. We're going to make you work for everything that you're trying to do as a team. And we're going to do everything we can to make life difficult for you on the offensive end. And look, they didn't have much offensive talent at all on that first team that he had. It helped a little bit when he got Josh Hubbard in his second season as the head coach. The thing that is concerning, the thing that continues to be an issue for Mississippi State this year, is that they're not great offensively. That's definitely true, but they're not good defensively. And like I said, I've said this before, and I hate to harp on it, but this is the second straight season they've not been good defensively. And that is a hallmark, that is a staple of what Chris Jans brings to the table when he is the head coach of your team. And for whatever reason, that seems to have gone away. And that worries me going forward. Look, I'm not one of those I know there are people that are calling for the Chris Jans era to come to an end. I'm not one of those people. I'm willing to give him a chance to fix this next season, but obviously he's got to fix it next season. But it is concerning going into the future. Is the thing that he values more than anything else, the thing that you have to be able to do to get on the court for Chris Jans, is to be solid defensively and to be able to lock the other team down. And Mississippi State can't lock anybody down. I mean, they can't lock anybody down. They can't get stops. It seems like teams can score at will against them at times. And this team, after, kind of getting a little bit of a spark after they beat Ole Miss, and after they beat, I don't remember who it was, the other team that they beat, that I wasn't expecting them to beat. Oh, Auburn. After they beat those two teams, and they had South Carolina next on the slate. You're like, okay, maybe they can kind of get on the run, get some confidence going. I wasn't expecting them to beat Alabama, but it was just a really bad game. I wasn't expecting it to be quite that bad. But this team then just blows it against South Carolina. They played terribly against Alabama, and you have to start to question again, what is the future of this team, and what is the future of Chris Jans? Like I said, he's not getting fired, and I'm not calling for him to be fired, but it is concerning. If you're a fan of Mississippi State basketball, it's concerning to watch this team just limp into the SEC tournament, where, as of right now, I mean, they might end up being, just based off of where they are in the standings, they might be the favorite on the first day of the tournament, because of the fact that it's a 5-day tournament now, and they'll play on that Wednesday. But you don't expect them to get past day 2 at this point. I mean, I don't know why you have any faith in them to be able to do that, because they haven't shown the ability really to beat anybody that's not in the bottom half of the SEC standings. I just don't see them getting through the rest of this schedule and being in a position where they can beat a decent team in the SEC tournament. I just don't see that being the case. And you have to wonder what it's going to be like for Chris Jans going into next year. There's going to be pressure on him. Some people have said, he might try to leave. He's tried to leave the last couple of years. And if you're a Power 4 team and you're looking at Chris Jans I don't know why you would take him this year if you weren't going to take him in previous seasons. So I don't get that. But regardless, like I said, it is concerning. We'll just see how they respond. All right, real quick, I want to talk about two other things. I want to talk about the ABS system in Major League Baseball. If you weren't aware of this, look, I'm a huge baseball fan. The first team I ever was a fan of was the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like I said, once we get into regular season, I will probably talk more about them on this podcast, and hopefully maybe some Dodger fans can find it as well. And they might end up taking up most of my time on the podcast in the summer. But Major League Baseball is introducing the ABS system, the automated ball strike system. And I'll be very interested to see how this plays out this year, because the way it works is a batter, pitcher, or catcher, if they do not agree with a call that the home plate umpire makes about balls and strikes, all they have to do is tap their head, tap their helmet, or tap their hat, and then they go to a review. It happens very quickly. If you haven't seen any of the minor league games where there has been a challenge by a player, it happens pretty quick. The player will tap their head, the umpire will step out, and they will, in a few seconds, they will get a confirmation of whether or not the call was correct and whether or not the call or was incorrect. And why I'm interested in seeing this is I'm interested to see what this does to home plate umpire strike zones, because everybody knows this. If you're a fan of Major League Baseball, if you're a fan of baseball in general, every umpire has like their own strike zone. Some have it a little bit lower, some have it a little bit higher, some of them like it a little bit further outside, some like it a little further inside, and everybody kind of has their own strike zone, and it's not consistent across every single umpire. And the reason why I'm wondering this is because it is the strike zone that the ABS system uses is consistent. It is going to be the same regardless. There is no, if it's out, slightly outside strike zone, slightly inside strike, slightly higher strike zone. It is within the set parameters that they have for the ABS system. And, if umpires are constantly having their calls overturned, one, I would imagine that they're going to face, I would hope at least, I'm not going to say that that's definitely going to happen, but I would hope at least that Major League Baseball would step in and say something to these guys, like, you've got to get your strike zone in order, because you're having all these calls. You're having the balls and strike calls that you made are constantly being overturned. We got to get that fixed. Like, I don't know if they'll do that or not, but I would hope they would. But I would also imagine, just for those umpires, though, it would be embarrassing to have their calls constantly being overturned because people are challenging it, and they're not getting it right. Like I said, so I would hope and pray that this kind of normalizes strike zones, and it becomes kind of the same for everybody. I'm also going to be interested, because I think this will help batters more than it's going to help pitchers. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it feels like there are more balls that are actually called strikes than there are strikes that are called balls. And maybe maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe that's just my anecdotal observation of the situation, but I'll be very interested to see how this plays out. I saw one instance earlier in spring training this year where, what's his name for the Pirates? I can't remember his name all of a sudden. The most dominant pitcher in baseball, and now all of a sudden I can't remember his name. But Matt Olson for the Braves was going against him, and it looked a little bit outside, and Matt Olson tapped his helmet, and he challenged the strike call, and it was 1/10 of an inch outside, and it got called for a ball. So, like I said, I'm really interested in how this is going to play out. I'm hoping that I think it's going to be good. The only thing I don't like about it is, why can't they just put an earpiece in home plate umpires' ears, and after the pitch have it, sent to their earpiece and tell them what to call? That to me is the best system. We shouldn't have to have a challenge. If the call is not right, let's get the call right. And like I said, that part of it does kind of annoy me, but regardless. So, all right, real quick before I sign off, because this is going to be a short show, and also I'm getting kind of close to my time where I need to log into work. Shrinking. If you haven't seen Shrinking on Apple TV, I would highly recommend you check it out. I know a lot. This show is really, really good. I forgot that the next season had started a few weeks ago, and I ended up just looking at my Apple TV app and I saw, I was like, oh crud, I forgot that was out there. And they've done, I think, 5 episodes, and I spent this week getting caught up on it. And this is season 3, and the first 2 seasons were really good. This season has been just as good as well. I've enjoyed it. It's got a great cast, but the 2 people that are the biggest stars, obviously, Harrison Ford is in this, and he is absolutely amazing. He reminds me so much of my grandfather in this. He's just kind of this cranky, curmudgeon-y old man. Deep down, there is a heart of gold there, but you have to you really have to get crack through it to find it. And that's one of the things that makes the show just so really, really, really good. Like I said, I like this show so much. He's good. You've got Jason Segel, who's really the star of the show. He's the main character, and he's fantastic in this. And he and Ford together are just absolutely amazing. It's created by Bill Lawrence. If you don't know who Bill Lawrence is, he did Scrubs. He's done some other things. He did Ted Lasso. He's the creator of it as well. And I'm a huge fan of the things that he does. And if you were to watch this show, you would really see kind of like that Scrubs style sense of humor coming through it, because that's very, very apparent through this. Brett Goldstein is in this as well. He's kind of got a supporting role. And if you're not, like, Brett Goldstein, I know that name. Why do I know that name? It's because Brett Goldstein was Roy from Ted Lasso, if you saw Ted Lasso. So, like I said, this show, it's incredibly heartwarming. It's incredibly funny at times, but they also can go serious at times. It does so many different things incredibly well, and it's one of the things that makes the show so entertaining and makes it so captivating to watch. I love it. I think it's just absolutely wonderful. Like I said, I love the dynamic between all the members of the cast. They just found the absolute perfect people to cast for this show. And, I don't know how many seasons they plan to do this. Harrison Ford is old, and that's a part of the show is his character is, he has, I think, he has Parkinson's. That's right. He has Parkinson's. And, he's dealing with that, and the difficulties that come along with that. So, like I said, I don't know how long this show can go on. It could go on for a while, but you never know. Like I said, it's just really, really good. If you haven't checked it out, I would highly recommend it. It will definitely make your day. The first episode of this season was a little long. I will say, if I want to criticize it for anything, it was a little bit long. But other than that, it's just been an absolute joy to watch. So, all right, like I said, I'm kind of short on time this morning, but I did want to kind of get a quick episode in. So I appreciate you guys tuning in, and until next time, we'll talk to you.